My mother has a way of talking about me that makes me feel like furniture. Present, occasionally useful, but never really the thing anyone came to see. I noticed it early around 7 or 8, when my brother Connor started winning things. Spelling bees, Little League, the science fair 3 years in a row. Every trophy went on the mantle in the living room. Every certificate got framed. My mother would call my grandmother on the phone and I could hear her from the hallway, her voice doing that thing where it climbed a full octave with pride. "He's just so driven, Mom. He's going to be something. You'll see." I was standing right there once when she said that. She saw me in the doorway and smiled at me the way you smile at someone you pass in a grocery store aisle. Polite, forgettable. I smiled back and went upstairs and sat on my bed and told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that for about 20 more years. Connor is 2 years younger than me. He's 31 now, with perfect hair and a firm handshake and the kind of confidence that comes from never once being made to feel like a question mark. He works at a corporate law firm downtown. He drives a car my father talks about at dinner parties. He got engaged last spring to a woman named Jessica, who is smart and warm and who, I would later discover, had known exactly who I was for quite some time before we ever spoke more than a few words to each other. I am Maya. I am a school counselor. I have been one for 6 years at a public middle school in the same city where I grew up, where my parents still live in the house with the trophy mantle. I also run a nonprofit I started 3 years ago, called Second Floor, named after the floor of the school where my office is, where kids started showing up before first bell because they had nowhere else to go. My parents have never once asked me how Second Floor is doing. My mother calls it my project. As in, "How's your little project going, Maya?" The word little does a lot of work in that sentence. So does the pause before project, the half-second where she seems to be searching for something more impressive to call it and coming up empty. My father doesn't ask at all. He knows I work with kids. He knows it has something to do with mental health outreach. Once, at Thanksgiving, he told his college roommate that I was in education, and when the man asked what I taught, my father said, "Oh, she's more on the support side," and then steered the conversation back to Connor's latest case. I want to be fair to them. They are not monsters. They are just people who decided, somewhere along the way, that one of their children was the story they wanted to tell and the other was the part they skipped over. The wedding was on a Saturday in October. Jessica and Connor had gotten engaged the previous March, at a restaurant my mother chose, with a ring my father helped pick out, at a dinner I was not invited to. I found out from a group text the next morning. She said yes, with 3 photos and 17 heart emojis from my mother. I sent back a smiley face, and then sat in my car in the parking lot of the school for a few minutes before going inside. I am not proud of that, but I am being honest. The venue was a renovated estate about 40 minutes outside the city. Stone walls, oak trees, a garden that looked like it had been planned by someone with a very clear idea of what elegance was supposed to look like. 400 guests. I know because my mother mentioned the number at least 6 times between the engagement and the day itself, always as evidence of something of Connor's standing, of the family's standing, of how far they had all come. I drove myself. My parents had offered to ride together, and then my mother had called 2 days before to say they were going early for photos, and there wasn't really room in the car with the garment bags and the gift, and wasn't it easier if I just met them there? I said of course. I meant it, mostly. My seat at the ceremony was in the 5th row on the groom's side. My parents were in the front row, naturally. I could see the back of my mother's head, her hair done in a way that I recognized from every important occasion of my life, the same style she wore to my college graduation, where she spent most of the afternoon telling people about Connor's acceptance to law school. The ceremony was beautiful. I mean that genuinely. Jessica looked stunning. Connor cried when he saw her, which surprised me in the way it always surprises you, when you realize someone you know mostly from a distance is actually a full human being. I cried too, quietly, into a folded tissue I had put in my clutch, specifically for this purpose, because I had known I would cry, and I had not wanted to be caught unprepared. Afterward, there was cocktail hour in the garden. My mother found me by the hydrangea bushes and hugged me briefly, the kind of hug that is mostly shoulder and arm and doesn't quite reach the chest. She told me I looked nice. Then she spotted someone across the garden and said, "Oh, I need to introduce your father to the Hendersons. Their son is at the same firm as Connor." And she was gone before I finished saying, "Of course." I got a glass of white wine and found a corner near a stone railing and watched the garden fill up with people who all seemed to know each other. A woman I recognized as my mother's college friend, Diane, came and stood near me for a while. She asked how I was doing. Eddie said I was well. She asked what I was up to these days, and I explained about the counseling, about second floor. She nodded in the way people nod when they are being polite, but their eyes are already searching the crowd for someone they would rather talk to. Then my mother materialized beside her, and the two of them slid into a conversation about the rehearsal dinner, and I slipped away. The reception was in the main hall, and when I found my place card and followed it to my table, I stood in front of it for a moment and just looked. Table 11. Against the far wall, near the door to the catering corridor, the table had a partial view of the dance floor if you craned slightly to the left, and no direct view of the head table at all. My table mates were a cousin of Jessica's I had never met, two college friends of Connor's I had met maybe twice, and an older couple who turned out to be neighbors of the venue owner and had been added to fill space. I sat down and put my purse on the chair beside me and took a long, slow breath. I want to tell you I was fine. Parts of me were fine. The parts of me that had been absorbing this kind of thing for 29 years, that had developed a whole internal architecture for handling it. Those parts were fine. But there was another part. The part that had driven 40 minutes alone and walked into this venue alone and was now sitting at table 11 alone, that was very quietly not fine at all. The cousin, whose name was Brooke, was friendly and funny, and we talked about her drive down from Portland, and I was grateful for her. The college friends were deep in their own conversation. The older couple asked me how I knew the couple, and when I said Connor was my brother, the woman said, "Oh, how lovely," in a tone that suggested she had expected me to say something else. Dinner came. Speeches were made. My father gave one that made half the room cry, all about Connor's integrity and his work ethic and the man he had become. It was a beautiful speech. My father is a good speaker. Somewhere in the third paragraph he said, "And, of course, we are so proud of our family, everyone who is here tonight to celebrate these two." And he looked briefly in the direction of my table, and I lifted my wineglass slightly, and he moved on. My mother did not speak, but during the applause after my father's toast, she leaned over to the woman beside her. I later found out it was her cousin Linda and said something. I was too far away to hear, but Linda glanced toward table 11, and then back at my mother, with an expression I recognized, the kind that says that's a shame without using any of the words. I excused myself from the table and went to the bathroom and stood at the sink for a while, running cold water over my wrists, the way I had learned to do when I was in graduate school and needed to reset. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was wearing a dark green dress I had bought specifically for this day, and my hair was pinned up, and I looked fine. I looked like someone who was fine. I was thinking about leaving. I had thought about it before, at other events, and I had never done it. But this time, there was a small, tired voice inside me saying, "You don't have to stay. You could say you're not feeling well. You could send a gift later and a card with a genuine note, and that would be enough. You have already sat in that chair. You have already watched the speech. You have done the thing that was asked of you, and no one here is watching the door you came in through, so no one will notice the door you go out." I turned off the faucet. I straightened up. I went back to table 11. I had been sitting back down for maybe 10 minutes when the evening shifted in a direction I had not anticipated. His name, I would find out shortly, was Dr. Richard Okafor. He was tall, probably in his early 60s, with silver at his temples, and the kind of posture that came from decades of being the most important person in whatever room he walked into. He was a guest on Jessica's side. Her family had deep roots in the city's medical community, and his name, I would later understand, carried significant weight in those circles. He had spent the last 12 years as the director of youth behavioral health initiatives for the county. His work had been featured in 2 national publications. The governor had cited his programs by name in a budget address the previous spring. I did not know any of this yet. What I knew was that he was moving through the room with a slight, purposeful energy, scanning tables, and then he stopped, and he looked at me. He said my last name first, the way people do when they are confirming something they already half know. Then, Maya? I said yes. He pulled out the empty chair beside me and sat down and extended his hand and told me his name, and something in the back of my mind recognized it faintly. A name I had seen in the grant acknowledgement section of a county report. Maybe, or on a letter that had come to the school with official letterhead. I shook his hand and said it was nice to meet him. He said, "I have been hoping to meet you in person for some time." I did not know what to do with that sentence. He explained that he had a daughter. Her name was Priya. She was 14 when she started attending Jefferson Middle School, which is where I work, which is where my office is on the second floor. She was 14, and she had transferred in the middle of the school year after her parents separated, and she had walked into my office on a Thursday morning in February without an appointment and sat in the chair across from my desk and told me that she wasn't sure she wanted to keep going. I remembered Priya. I will always remember Priya. She had this habit of tucking her hands under her thighs when she was nervous, and she spoke very quietly until she felt safe. And then, she was one of the most articulate young people I had ever talked to. We spent 6 weeks doing sessions twice a week. I connected her with a therapist outside of school. I called her mother. I checked in through the summer by email. The last I had heard, she was doing well, thriving, actually. A junior now. On the debate team. Her father looked at me across the table at my brother's wedding and said, "She told me about you. Specifically, the way you kept the door open even when she stopped coming in. The way you checked in without making her feel watched. She said you made her feel like someone was paying attention." I opened my mouth and then closed it. "My wife and I owe you a debt we genuinely don't know how to repay," he said. "But when I saw your name on the seating chart and realized you were here, I wanted to at least say it in person. I said it was my job. I said I was glad Priya was doing well. I said it quietly, and I meant every word, and I was fighting very hard to keep my face arranged in a normal expression because something was happening inside my chest that I didn't entirely have language for." He shook his head slightly at the "it was my job" part. He said, "We both know it's more than that." Then he mentioned second floor. He mentioned it the way someone mentions a thing they have studied. He knew when I had filed for nonprofit status. He knew the name of the school board liaison I worked with. He knew that we had expanded our peer support program to 2 additional schools in the district in September. He said he had been following the organization's work because it aligned with initiatives his office was developing, and that he had actually, several weeks prior, written a letter of support for our federal grant application. I did not know about the letter. I did not yet know about the grant. He looked at me with an expression I can only describe as gentle bewilderment and said, "You haven't heard yet, have you?" I said I hadn't heard what. He said, "The award came through 2 days ago. I wasn't sure if they had notified you yet given the weekend. Maya's second floor was awarded the full amount, $1.8 million, over 3 years. It was approved on Thursday." I put my wine glass down. I put it down very carefully on the white tablecloth, and I folded my hands in my lap, and I breathed in slowly through my nose, because the room had gone very slightly sideways, and I needed a moment. $1.8 million, 3 years. The application I had stayed up past midnight for 4 separate nights to finish. The budget I had revised 11 times. The letters I had solicited from teachers and parents and former students. The vision statement I had written and deleted and rewritten from scratch at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. Sitting on my kitchen floor because I had been at my desk so long my back hurt. I said, quietly, I didn't know. Dr. Okafor smiled. He said, "Congratulations." He said his office would be in touch about potential collaboration. He said Priya was going to be very proud when he told her. He stayed at the table for a while longer, and we talked, really talked. The kind of conversation where you lose track of the noise around you, about youth mental health infrastructure and the gaps in school-based services, and what the next 3 years could look like for second floor. He had ideas I had not considered. He had connections I would have taken years to build on my own. At some point I realized I was leaning forward with my elbows on the table, and I did not straighten up. I don't know exactly when my mother appeared beside the table. I heard her voice first. The slightly higher register she used for people she wanted to impress. "Dr. Okafor Richard. Hello. I didn't realize you knew each other." He looked up and smiled and said that I was an impressive young woman and that she must be very proud. My mother laughed the laugh she uses when she needs a second to recalibrate. She said, of course we are." She put her hand on my shoulder briefly. It lasted about 2 seconds. Dr. Okafor said, "Did you hear about the federal grant? Second Floor Maya's organization, it was just awarded full funding. It's a significant milestone for youth mental health work in this county. I've been following the program for over a year. What she has built is remarkable." My mother's hand was still on my shoulder, and I felt it go still. She said, "We're so proud." Her voice was even, careful, the voice she uses when she is composing herself in real time. Dr. Okafor said something about Second Floor's potential reach and mentioned a colleague of his at the Department of Education who had flagged our model as one to watch nationally. I nodded and answered, and tried to stay present in the conversation, while some part of me was watching my mother's face from the corner of my eye. She was smiling. She was doing it correctly, the smiling. But her eyes were doing the math. My father arrived a few minutes later, drawn over by some social instinct toward important-looking conversations. He introduced himself, and Dr. Okafor shook his hand and said, "Your daughter is doing extraordinary work. I hope you know that." My father said yes, of course, absolutely, with the conviction of someone saying words in a foreign language they had just been taught. Dr. Okafor excused himself shortly after to find his wife, and my father stood at the edge of the table in his suit with his champagne glass, and looked at me with an expression I had not seen from him before. Not pride exactly. Something more uncertain than pride. Something that looked, if I am being precise about it, like the beginning of a question he did not know how to ask. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, "I should get back to Brooke. She drove down from Portland, and she doesn't know anyone here." My father said my name. Just my name. I looked at him. I said, "Tell Connor and Jessica congratulations again. It was a beautiful ceremony." And I turned back to Brooke, who was looking slightly bewildered by the whole preceding scene, and I poured her the last of the wine from our table bottle and asked her what Portland was like in October. Connor found me near the end of the evening, when the dancing had been going for an hour and the room was loud and warm and slightly loosened by the open bar. He came and stood beside me, and we watched the floor for a moment, without saying anything. The way siblings can sometimes do, occupying the same silence without having to explain it. He said, "I heard about the grant." I said, "Jessica told you?" He said, "She already knew about it, actually. She knew about Second Floor. She mentioned it to me months ago when she saw something about your program in the county newsletter." I looked at him. He said, "She thought what you were doing was important. She's the one who invited Dr. Okafor, actually. His family and hers go back years." He paused. "She asked me if I had ever told you how proud I was of you, and I realized I didn't have a good answer." I turned back toward the dance floor. He said, "Maya." I said, "Connor, it's your wedding. You should be dancing." He said, "I know I wasn't always. I know I let them." He stopped, started again. I could have said more. When they would do the thing they do, I could have said more and I didn't. And I've been thinking about that for a while. I stayed quiet for a moment, not because I had nothing to say but because I was choosing carefully. I said, "I love you. I'm glad you married Jessica. I think she is going to be good for you in ways you haven't figured out yet." I paused. "And I need you to understand that what they did, what all of you did, for years is not something I can just fold up and put away because tonight went a different direction. It doesn't work like that." He nodded. His jaw was tight. I said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not cutting anyone off. But things are going to be different going forward. I decide how much of myself I give in those rooms. And that's not a negotiation." He said, "That's fair." I said, "I know it is." He hugged me then, a real one, the kind that reaches the chest. I let him. I even hugged back, because I meant what I said. I was not going anywhere, and the part of me that had loved my brother since we were children, sharing a back seat and a bag of chips on road trips, had never actually gone away. It had just learned to protect itself. I drove home with the windows down, which I know sounds like something someone does in a movie to signal that they have processed a feeling, but I genuinely just needed the air. The night was cool and smelled like October, like dried leaves and something faintly wood smoke, and the highway was mostly empty at that hour. My phone had 2 voicemails from the grants office. I did not listen to them until I was parked outside my apartment. I sat in my car in the quiet and played the first one, a woman with a calm, professional voice telling me that the application had been reviewed by the full committee and the award had been approved, and that she was looking forward to discussing next steps when I had a moment. I played the second one. More details. A number to call. I sat with it for a while. $1.8 million. 3 years. The program I had built in my apartment on a secondhand desk, funded initially by $400 of my own savings and a bake sale organized by one of the 8th grade teachers who believed in it before I had the language to fully explain what I was trying to do. I thought about the kids who had sat in the chair across from my desk. I thought about Priya, specifically, tucking her hands under her thighs and speaking quietly until she felt safe. I thought about all the second floors of all the schools where kids were sitting right now, or would be sitting on Monday morning, not knowing where to go. I thought about table 11. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that, not because crying would have been wrong, but because I had been doing my crying in parking lots for a long time, and that particular night I did not feel like crying. I felt something else entirely. Something steadier than relief and quieter than triumph. Something that did not need anyone to witness it to be real. I called my best friend Tara, who had known about second floor since the beginning, and who had proofread 3 versions of the grant application. And I told her, and she screamed loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. And I laughed for the first time all day, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere uncomplicated. My mother texted me late that night. It said, "You looked beautiful today. I'd love to hear more about your work sometime. Maybe we can get lunch this week." I read it twice. Then I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and made myself a cup of tea, and stood at the window and looked at the street below, and thought about what it meant to be seen by the wrong people for years, and what it meant to be seen, finally, by the right ones. I did not text back that night. In the morning, when I had slept and eaten, and had time to decide what I actually wanted, I wrote back, "Thank you. Yes, I'd like that." Short, true. Nothing more than I meant. The lunch, when it happened, was not perfect. My mother still paused in some of the old places. My father still defaulted to questions about Connor's caseload before circling back to me. These things do not fix themselves overnight, and I am old enough now to know that waiting for people to transform completely is a way of putting your own life on hold. But something had shifted. Not in them. Not entirely in me. In what I was willing to carry into those rooms, and what I was willing to leave in the car. I have a meeting next Tuesday with Dr. Okafor's office about a potential collaboration that could bring the second floor model to 12 additional schools in the county. I have a call next Wednesday with a program officer at the grants office to walk through the 3-year budget. I still drive myself. I still arrive alone. I am not waiting for anyone to give me a front row seat. I stopped waiting for that a long time ago, and what I built in the meantime turned out to be worth far more than the seat ever was.